Coming off my recent planetary qualifier top 8 finish, I finally get a chance to relax a little bit. Things are slowing down, at least as far as events go, until we finally get set 3, which is right around the corner. That gives me the opportunity to talk about this once again. If you haven't watched it, I had posted a video after the first week of planetary qualifiers and had some of my thoughts in a kind of, well, to be blunt, rambling manner about the current state of the meta, specifically Boba Fett. Now, a lot of people were, we'll say, animated with their responses as to what I said in that video. And I do feel that I guess because of the presentation, people got kind of confused. So I wanted to spend some time to talk about it now that we have additional weeks of data to look at and discuss organized play as a whole. Now, I will say at the outset that I'm going to say a lot of things that realistically could be a 5-part, hour-long each video series throughout all of this, and I'm just not going to make this video that long. I want to try and keep it short and concise. So if you want to hear any more about some of these subjects, feel free to let me know down in the comments because I'd love to talk about it. I have on stream many times, and I constantly do it because balance is a discussion that always comes up. But spoiler alert, and this is one of those things, balance is not the most important thing in games and never has been, never will be. Now, that's a very generalized statement, but like I said, that's a topic for another time. Today, we're going to be talking about Boba and the ramifications of its results from the planetary qualifiers. Now, right at the outset, I'm going to lose a whole bunch of viewers because I'm going to say that, generally speaking, I'm okay with the way the meta currently is for Set 2. Anyone that's left, I'm going to assume you're reasonable and at least willing to hear out what's going on. The caveat to what I just stated is that Boba is in a position where you can make a compelling argument that it needs to be addressed. Addressed can come in multiple forms. We'll touch on that momentarily. I instead want to start with why I am fine with the current state of Boba as it pertains to the general Set 2 meta. The crux of the discussion is this. Is Boba Fett a singular monolith? Therefore, it is just one thing that we are looking at. Every version of Boba, no matter what cards it plays, no matter what the play style is, it is the same thing. Or is Boba a conglomeration of multiple different archetypes, multiple different decks and strategies, and therefore we need to be more granular in examining the current state of affairs? Here's another offboarding point from the video, or offboarding stage for the video. If you are of the opinion that every Boba deck has to be lumped together and it's strictly we're looking at Boba as a singular entity, I disagree. I think your opinion is reasonable, and I think that there are reasons to consider that as problematic. But within the context I'm about to discuss, I disagree. So if that's the entire crux of your argument, all right, go ahead, click another video. We're going to discuss Boba as it should be. Multiple different decks, multiple different archetypes that happen to straddle between those archetypes with the same leader. And this is going to be within the competitive context of the game. If you want to make an argument, again, about the casual scene or people who want their favorite whatever character to suddenly have more prominence, okay, sure. I'm coming at it from the perspective of a strictly competitive player. I want to go to tournaments. I want a reasonable metagame and gameplay experience. Setting all these parameters and boundaries and expectations is going to be important for the discussion that's about to ensue. Now, I've played card games since 1994 and competitive since about then. A variety of different things, obviously starting with Magic back in the day and going through digital card games and coming back around to Star Wars Unlimited. I've seen a variety of metagames, ones that are significantly worse than what we have now, but to that end, just because something is worse doesn't make the current state of things good inherently. I think it's very easy to look at the statistics over the last 3 weeks, even though we are seeing a downward trend for Boba from week 2 to week 3, at least in terms of top 8 berths, and discover that, hey, Boba is just prominent, super prominent, both in terms of actual placements as well as taking home the overall W. Now, none of this is really going to take anyone by surprise, but these numbers that I'm going to put up on screen now actually do demonstrate that we need to be more granular about the way we think about this. Now, first of all, shout out to Dada Swoo. You can check them out on YouTube. Future Editing Me will get their banner up on screen. And a link for that, of course, will be in the description of this video. These numbers were put together by Lev, not for me personally, but just in general, based off the data from SWU Competitive Hub. Link for that will also be in the description. The most telling thing, of course, as you're looking through these numbers, is the overall quantity. And again, whether you lump Boba Yellow, Boba Green, Boba Red, and Boba Blue all together, or you break them out independently, because they tell two dramatically different story. Combined, Boba is not just overwhelming in the quantity of top 8s, it is also overwhelming in quantity of overall wins. And it is in no world something that could be considered acceptable, at least not by anyone who wants a reasonable metagame, that is. However, if you break things down into their component parts and you actually examine the different numbers, you will see that there are plenty of, not just plenty of other decks quantity-wise, but also decks putting up comparable numbers to the non-green Boba variants. While each of those decks are respectable in and of themselves, they aren't drowning out the rest of the metagame. No one's denying that Boba Fett itself is head and shoulders above if not every, then certainly the vast majority of leaders. And that by itself is indicative of one of the other problems going on with Star Wars Unlimited. Remember I said earlier that I couldn't touch on everything in an extended piece? This is one of them. There is a lot of discussion to be had about how much power can be concentrated in a game piece that you are guaranteed to see in 100% of game. Pushing more power into that is very dangerous for the overall health of the game, because obviously cards that are in your deck are more variance driven. That's a debate for another day, whether we can have super powerful leaders like Boba be the standard or not. But the undeniable fact is that Boba is better than a number of other heroes. You'll have to forgive me for using leader and hero interchangeably. Force of habit from other games. So what do we do about it? There are a number of options. I talked about two of them primarily in the previous video, and those are, of course, errata, which please do not do, and bans, which I would prefer if there is going to be action taken. However, before we even get into what the action that's going to be taken is, we need to decide when it's going to happen, because the SWU team has repeatedly told us that they designed the first 3 sets together. If we are to both believe them and trust in their ability to design a worthwhile game, that would mean that we have not seen the complete picture for the first 3 sets. What does that mean? Well, if you've played any other card game, they pretty much never have a healthy meta for the first set, the second set, because certain ideas just aren't fleshed out. Certain ones will just plainly get more support. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Everybody that's played a card game knows some cards are better than others, and it helps the evolution of metagames and keeping things fresh and interesting. To that end, if we are mere weeks away from set 3, are we willing to ask FFG to step in right this second at the end of October when the other set is right around the corner and potentially upends everything? Really, only FFG has any insight into how this metagame plays out, and I will be the first to say that designers are not necessarily good players. Good players are not necessarily good designers either. These are wildly different skill sets. So the first question is, do you trust FFG? Do you feel that they know what they're doing going into set 3? Personally, I hope Boba doesn't just disappear if it levels out. I want it to still be a reasonable competitive option, but I can definitely hear the complaints from people that are screaming they're tired of seeing it, even if I disagree with them. Now, as I started out with, I don't personally feel that Boba needs to necessarily have something done unless we're specifically talking within the scope of Boba Green. That does breach thresholds for me after 3 weeks of play. I will add a asterisk to that statement in that the data from week 2 to week 3 is showing Boba on the decline overall. It's still putting up crazy numbers, but maybe people are figuring it out, and given more time, people would have adjusted further. Given that we're going to get that set that I keep talking about, it doesn't matter. But what does matter are the criteria, which is probably the most important part of this video, which I know no one who is going to go screaming in my comments is going to make it this far. If you did, you made it this far, thank you. But we're going to talk about what I think should be the criteria for banning a given card, not just leaders. So way back when, Magic had written an article, Wizards of the Coast had written an article explaining what their criteria was going to be for one of their formats where bans would exist. And that format was called Modern. Silly name, makes it complicated to talk about, but that was the name. And there were 4 criteria, and I'm going to explain each of them and how I think it pertains to Star Wars Unlimited, because these are generic enough that they can cross boundaries between games and really cover a lot of ground. So in no particular order, the win percentage for the deck/card. Is it winning too much? Pretty quantitative and very easy to grok. Second, meta share. Even if the deck is winning less than 50% of its games, does quote unquote everyone feel obligated to play that deck? And if it has above X percentage of the meta in a given event, or however many events that we're evaluating, it could be up for a ban. 3, how quickly does the deck end the game? Now, in the context of Modern, it was a eternal format, meaning that there were way more cards available and you get some potentially broken interactions. Therefore, games could end extremely quickly. I don't think we're there yet for Star Wars Unlimited, but inevitably there will be something either due to mistakes from the dev team or just that's the way the game progresses. Even if the game is not literally over, if it is effectively over because you've locked them out or you were in such extreme control from turn X, those all fall into the same category. Lastly, this is the least quantitative evaluation, but still a very important one. Is the deck, the interaction, the card so unfun that people stop wanting to play the game? Now, I've kind of stuck to these 4 for a ton of balance discussions because it makes sense even when you cross into other genres. I stream a lot of games, and the main one that I stream is Phobies. It's a miniatures game, essentially, 0 variance. So picture chess, but with a mana curve. And I'm sponsored for that. Got to put that out there. But these criteria apply to that game as well when we're talking about balance changes and other modifications because of the way that game works. Let's bring it to Star Wars here and talk about Boba. From a win percentage standpoint, and unfortunately for all of this, because FFG, they kind of pissed the bed on this one, they chose Melee over the clearly superior option of Limitless. We're stuck with the data that we have. So we can't get a full scope of the metagame. Is Boba 50% of the room? It can feel like that when you walk around, but that isn't an actual concrete number. So we don't know for sure. We can only go by what's reported for the top 8s and then to those few enterprising TOs that actually did all of the data collection by hand. In my personal evaluations, I tend to usually lean towards, did you get a top 8 berth rather than winning the whole event? Because top 8s, top 16s, top whatevers are a miniature tournament and tend to have a different metagame than the event at large. Getting to top 8 is one thing. Winning through top 8 is another. However, again, we're stuck with the data we have. Now, you could go to SWU Competitive Hub. You could look at Lev's numbers. And the fact of the matter is Boba is winning a lot, especially if you consider it as the monolith. As a singular entity, it is an incredible amount of wins. However, if you break it down and look at the individual archetype wins, it's only Boba Green that's really standing out from the crowd. In the other categories, you have other control decks outperforming Boba Blue. And in the aggro side of things, of course, Sabine is there to try and rival Boba Yellow and certainly dwarfs Boba Red. There has to be a threshold at which we say, this is fair, this is foul, this is too many wins, this is unreasonable. Whether you are going by the monolith metric or you are breaking things down individually. And personally, I think that Boba Green is pushing that threshold. When I see Boba Green, Boba Yellow, Boba Red, Boba Blue, even if it was and there have been 7 Bobas in a top 8, those are different and unique archetypes to me, so it does not bother me personally, hence why I started out with, I'm okay with the state of Boba. Where it's pushing it is Boba Green because it is consistently putting up those numbers and consistently able to take the W's. Now, for the next section, meta percentage, like I said, we don't know for the entire room. That's really what this is supposed to be a gauge of, but can, of course, be applied to top 8s. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, and I usually do, there is a consideration for how many leaders should be competitively viable at any given time. And I think that question is wrong. It's the incorrect way to look at the meta. To me, the meta should be examined under the guise of how many archetypes are viable and how many decks within an archetype are viable. And when I say that, we're talking about control decks, mid-range, aggro, possibly combo, whatever, ramp, if you want to break that out. Boba does straddle all of these, as mentioned earlier, but it isn't necessarily the best deck in all of those categories. It's certainly one of, when you look at the aggressive options. It absolutely is crushing things when you look at green. But is Boba blue, just because it's there and it's adding to the Boba numbers, really the issue we're trying to address here? Boba red is kind of a one-trick pony. Do we treat that on the same level as this other variant that is clearly performing way better? That doesn't seem reasonable. Now, again, you break down the numbers and we look at the data that's being reported, and we're seeing that, say, Sabine is putting up similar numbers to Boba Yellow, or even certainly crushing the other ones in representation. Is that a sign that we're okay? Maybe. It's definitely something that we have to at least examine when we're discussing this. Now, the third criteria is the kill turn. And like I said, this doesn't quite apply to SWU right now. I think you could definitely make an argument, if you really wanted to stretch it, about, say, cunning or something like that, accelerating the game too much. However, in the same breath, are you going to say that that's not okay, but Sabine is fine? I feel like that's pushing it. Speaking of Sabine, though, we're moving on to the unfun category, and I'll explain how that ties in. But this is the least quantifiable metric. You can't readily put a number on fun, certainly not one that people are going to agree with and say that this is enough, that's not enough. It's going to vary person to person. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether people crying about control, wailing about aggro, throwing a temper tantrum over mid-range, people are going to lose their minds no matter what. The very generic statement would be, we all want to play the game and have our decisions, our choices matter. And that's kind of where I look at it. And I think that when you sit down across from Boba, regardless of the version, you do still have to make relevant game decisions. Your opponent has to make relevant game decisions to end up at a conclusion. It's not just flipping coins. We're not just playing war. It's not 100% out of the player's hands. Now, the reason why I brought up Sabine is if we call back to whatever solution that happens to be determined, errata, ban, other. If we once again presume that the devs did in fact design these three sets together, and they tested it as Boba is currently written, the presumption here is that the relationships between different decks, say Boba to Sabine, is intended. We now remove Boba from the equation, either by banning it or we errata it, and it completely changes the interaction between those decks. Is Sabine now going to run amok and crush everything? Because this is the discussion that always has to be had whenever we're trying to have an external intervention like this on a game. What are the immediate ramifications? What are the long-term ramifications of this fallout? Because if it turns out, hey, we got rid of Boba, but now every event is 7 out of 8 Sabine, is that really better? To me, it would almost objectively be worse, because if we get strictly Sabine green, that is less diversity than we have with 4 different Boba variants. We do need to look at, well, Fantasy Flight needs to look at what's going to happen if Boba is excised in one way, shape, or form, and what impact that's going to have on the meta. They are the people who are the best qualified to examine this, simply because they have future knowledge of what is to come. So those are my thoughts at this stage. I've talked about a lot of different concepts and different things, and like I said, I can't really flesh them all out trying to keep this as short of a video as possible. I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of comments that don't really fit with, they're reacting to things that either I didn't say or didn't mean, and I'll decide whether I want to respond to them later. But feel free to ask me questions. Hit me up in Discord. There's links for all of my contacts and stuff in the description. I'm open to people pitching their case, but make your case. Like, actually create a discussion is where I'm going with it. But that's going to do it for this time. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for more Random Thoughts.